The morning was cold. Gray light filtered through the lace curtains, soft and uneven, painting long shadows across the wooden floor. Toys were scattered in little piles, a teddy bear on its side, a tiny train set with one car missing. I moved, slowly, my slippers whispering against the boards, and paused at the doorway. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heater, and even that felt distant. I thought about the door, the one she left through. It creaked the same way it did that day, though it had been fixed twice since. I could still hear it in my mind, the shiver in its hinge, the hesitant slam that sounded like goodbye. She didn't look back. Her eyes were full of something I didn't recognize then. Sadness, maybe, or fear. She whispered she'd be back soon. I believed her. The children were downstairs, their laughter bouncing off the walls, careless and bright. I could hear their little feet thumping, the clink of spoons against cereal bowls. I didn't go down. I stayed by the window, watching the weak sunlight try to warm the frost on the sill. The room smelled faintly of old wood and soap, of something permanent, something I thought I could always hold on to. I wondered if they would remember her face the way I did, shadowed, anxious, leaving a piece of herself behind. I wandered through the living room, my fingers brushing over the edge of the sofa. Dust had settled in soft lines where no one had bothered to move. A book lay open on the floor, pages curling, abandoned mid-story. I picked it up and smelled the paper, the ink, small comforts. I remembered reading to the children here, there. Tiny hands gripping the pages, faces pressed against mine. The quiet now was too loud. Then the phone rang, sharp and unexpected, cutting through the room like a wind through bare branches. I froze. My hand hovered over the receiver, reluctant. The sound felt wrong, like an intruder. Each ring echoed in the empty spaces between memories. I could hear the children's laughter fade as the call pressed on the silence. My heart thumped, slow and heavy, and I waited. Who could it be? Not a neighbor, not the school. It was too precise, too cold. I lifted the receiver. My voice was small. Hello? There was a pause, the kind that stretches, makes the air thick. Then her voice came. My daughter, older, stranger, accusing, though she hadn't yet said a word. I could hear the distance, the edge in it, and it made my chest tighten. The children kept playing, unaware of the tension growing upstairs, of the history pressing down on us all. I let the silence stretch a beat longer, listening to her breathing on the line. The house seemed to lean in with me, the walls holding their breath. The door didn't move, the hinges still quiet. I swallowed, feeling years fold over themselves in a single moment. And then I whispered, almost to myself, "Why now?" The line was still. The question hung in the cold gray light, unanswered. The phone felt heavier in my hand than it should. I could hear the line humming, the quiet crackle that comes when distance stretches too far. Then her voice came, soft at first, but sharp beneath it, like glass edges I hadn't felt before. My daughter, or someone who sounded like her. She didn't say hello. Not really. The words fell flat, precise, measured. You have my children. She said it like a statement, not a question. My fingers tightened around the receiver, knuckles white, and suddenly the house seemed too large, too empty. Even the children's laughter downstairs felt off, muffled, distant. Memories rose, unbidden. Nights when I rocked the youngest to sleep, humming songs I could barely remember myself. The smell of chicken stew bubbling on the stove, overcooked because I was too tired to watch it. Birthday cakes that leaned to one side, candles blown out with a quiet wish I could keep them safe forever. Christmas mornings spent stretching every dollar to make presents appear magical. Every small effort, every late night, every whispered prayer, it all came rushing back. The children peeked from the hallway, eyes wide and curious. They didn't understand the tension, not fully, but they knew. They always did. Little hands clutched each other's sleeves, and for a moment I saw the echo of the day she left their mother walking away, and the fear in their tiny faces. I tried to smile. I wanted to say it would be all right, but my voice caught somewhere between my chest and the receiver. She spoke again. Her tone was unfamiliar, clipped, as if she had rehearsed these words for years. You can't keep them from me. I could hear the pause, the weight she expected me to feel. But what did she know of nights spent soothing scraped knees, of whispering stories in the dark to calm fears that weren't hers to start? 13 years had built a life between us, a life she seemed to forget. The walls of the house pressed in closer. The floorboards creaked beneath my shifting weight. I traced the edge of the counter, fingertips brushing the worn wood, grounding myself in what I knew was real. Each photograph on the wall, each smudge of paint on the staircase, each tiny shoe by the door, all proof of years she seemed to erase with a single accusation. I swallowed, trying to steady myself. My voice was barely a whisper. I raised them. Every day. Every night. 13 years. She didn't answer, only silence. A line stretched across time and space, fragile and unbroken. I put the receiver down slowly, afraid to break the connection, afraid it might never ring again. The children peeked again, curiosity mixed with unease. I traced the worn pattern on the rug, feeling the memories press into me, all the meals, the bedtime stories, the quiet victories. How could someone forget that? How could she look through the years and see only what she wanted to believe? The question lingered in the room, soft and heavy, as the phone rested silent on the counter. And I knew the answers weren't coming today. The attic smelled like forgotten seasons. Dust hung in the air, caught in the weak shafts of sunlight that slipped through the small window. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, lids bowed from years of neglect. I climbed the stairs slowly, each creak underfoot a reminder that this space, too, had been waiting for someone to remember. I pulled the top box toward me, the cardboard rough against my palms. Inside were letters, photographs, scraps of paper folded and refolded so many times their edges had softened into nothing. I lifted a yellowed envelope, tracing the faint pencil scrawl of a name I barely recognized anymore. Each letter smelled of old ink and time itself. The words, once urgent and alive, now seemed to whisper, like ghosts of a past I had tried to keep alive. I sat cross-legged on the floor, children's laughter faint through the ceiling. My fingers lingered over a photograph of the three of them. On the porch, hair messy from play, eyes wide with trust, smiles half-formed. The smallest hand clutched mine. I could almost feel their warmth again. The letters spoke of small days, scraped knees, school recitals, quiet dinners, notes tucked into lunches, birthday wishes whispered over candlelight. Every folded piece of paper carried the weight of love I had given when no one was watching. I hesitated on a diary, its leather cracked, spine worn thin. I opened it carefully. Inside, scrawled in uneven handwriting, were the little victories and worries, the celebrations and heartbreaks I had shared silently with them. I remembered the nights I had tiptoed into their rooms, reading to them until the softest breath told me they were finally asleep. The house, even empty, seemed to hum with memory. Footsteps on the stairs startled me. The children were here, their small shadows stretching along the attic walls. They hovered at the threshold, curious but cautious, sensing the heaviness in the air without knowing why. I patted the floor beside me. "Come," I said softly. "Look." They shuffled closer, peering at photographs, pointing at familiar faces. The youngest traced a finger over a frayed edge, whispering, "That's me?" I nodded. "Yes, baby, that's you." Their mother's absence hung in the corners like a shadow we'd all learned to live with. I stacked the letters carefully, letting them fall into neat piles. Some were unopened. Some had faded words barely legible. Each one reminded me these were pieces of lives we had built, quietly, without recognition. Memories like threads, weaving the children's lives into mine. And then it came again, the echo of her voice from the phone, distant, accusing, as if the years could be erased by a single call. I held a letter close to my chest, feeling the weight of all the small days. I looked at the children, their faces innocent, trusting. I thought of the nights I had stayed awake, the mornings I had hurried to make breakfast, the birthdays and holidays I had carried alone. The attic seemed to hold its breath with me, shadows. Leaning closer, listening, the silence after the laughter was heavy, almost sacred. I wondered if she could ever see this. Could she see the life we had lived in the quiet, in the small, unnoticed moments? Or would it all be invisible to her, forgotten behind anger and distance. I stacked the last box, tracing the edge of the lid with a finger. Then I stood, the dust motes floating in the sunbeam, and descended the stairs. Memories tucked into every corner, shadows settling around me like old friends, and I asked myself quietly, to no one in particular, could the past offend itself if only someone remembered it? I found the calendar in the kitchen, yellowed at the edges, curling like it had absorbed too many years. Each square was crowded with small, looping handwriting birthdays, school events, doctor visits, the little victories and milestones I had marked for them. I traced a finger over the dates, feeling the faint indentations left by a pen pressed too hard in moments of quiet determination. The sunlight that filtered through the blinds fell in stripes across the table, catching dust in the air, making it visible for the first time. I could hear the faint clink of spoons downstairs, the children eating breakfast, unaware of the storm pressing quietly into the walls. The calendar smelled faintly of old paper and vinegar from the mop water I'd spilled months ago, a domestic scent that seemed almost sacred now. I remembered the first day I started writing in it. She had left, her bag at the door, her promise to return soon whispered and shaky. I had written the dates for school plays, first days of kindergarten, doctor appointments, all of it, because someone had to. It became my way of holding them close, mapping out the days so that nothing, not even time, could make them slip away. The pen in my hand hovered over the next blank square. I thought of all the birthdays we had celebrated alone, the small cakes and hastily wrapped presents, the quiet songs sung in unison while I held them close. Every day was a story, a small proof of care that I could see in the ink, in the careful lettering, in the little notes tucked at the corners. Don't forget the school concert or bring a sweater. Each line a tether to the life I had built around them. The children peeked into the kitchen, giggling quietly, curious about the movements of my hand over the old calendar. The youngest pointed at a scribble from last year. "Is this mine?" he asked. I smiled, nodding, though the smile was tight, brittle. "Yes, baby, that's you." I felt the years press into the room, heavy, unrelenting, as if the calendar itself remembered the weight of absence. And then I thought of her, the voice on the phone accusing me of stealing what was never hers to take. Could she look at this calendar and see the care it represented? Or would she only see ink and paper, blind to the nights I had stayed awake, the mornings I had coaxed them out of bed, the tears I had wiped quietly from their cheeks? Could she erase 13 years with a single accusation? The wall seemed to close in slightly, the house pressing closer with its familiar sounds, the tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant laughter of children. I traced a few more dates, each one a heartbeat in the life I had created, proof that love was not fleeting, even if it was forgotten by the one who left. I stood and let the calendar hang heavy on the wall. Its squares held stories of small joys, tiny triumphs, and quiet nights, all unnoticed, all essential. The light shifted, making the ink gleam faintly in the morning sun, and I felt a pang of something too heavy to name. And I whispered to the empty room, the children at my side, the house listening. Could someone forget this? Could someone ignore 13 years of life lived in the quiet? The question hung there, unanswered, as the sunlight moved across the squares, fading softly into the corners, and the calendar waited, patient and silent. The house was quiet in a way that felt too heavy. The children had fallen asleep hours ago, their steady breathing a soft rhythm beneath the ceiling. I sat in the armchair by the window, the lamp casting a weak glow across the room, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny spirits in the still air. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, brushing the bare branches against the window pane. I could hear the occasional creak of the floorboards, the settling of the old house, sounds I had long since stopped noticing until now. Each creak felt amplified, a reminder that the walls held memory, that every corner had witnessed both laughter and tears. My fingers rested on the arm of the chair, tracing the worn fabric, feeling the grooves that years of use had left behind. A noise startled me, a soft whimper from the hallway. The youngest had sat up, eyes wide in the dim light. I rose slowly, trying not to startle him further. His small hand found mine, gripping tightly. "I had a bad dream," he whispered. The words were so small, so fragile, I almost didn't hear them. I pulled him close, rocking gently, feeling the rise and fall of his chest against mine. The night pressed in around us. I thought of the nights I had done this alone, when she had left and I had been both mother and grandmother. I remembered the quiet songs I had hummed, the gentle pats on their backs, the soft assurances whispered in the dark. "It's okay, baby. You're safe." How many nights had I spent cradling them, my own tears hidden in the shadows, so she could rest easy in absence? I stayed there, rocking him slowly. The older two stirred in their beds, sensing unease without knowing why. Their small faces pressed against their pillows, eyes wide with the echoes of a dream. I brushed their hair back, feeling the soft strands slip through my fingers, grounding myself in the warmth of them, in the present. And then I thought of her voice over the phone, cold and distant, accusing me of something I had never done. Could she hear the rhythm of our nights? Could she remember the trembling hands and sleepless eyes that had held her children when she could not? 13 years of care, unseen, unnoticed by the one who had walked away. I lowered the youngest back into bed, tucking the blanket around him. The shadows stretched long across the floor, reaching for the corners where dust had settled thick. I stayed in the doorway for a moment, listening to the quiet breathing of all three children. Their trust was absolute, unspoken, fragile. The wind pressed against the window again, and I thought of how the night had always held both comfort and fear. I whispered softly, more to myself than to anyone, "They are safe. I have kept them safe." The house exhaled with me. The creaks softened. The shadows leaned closer, listening, understanding. But outside, the world remained unaware of the quiet battles fought behind closed doors, and somewhere in the distance, I could still hear the faint echo of her voice, a reminder that the past is never fully gone, even when the night is at its deepest. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter like a silent warning. Cream-colored, heavy, formal, the kind of paper that carries more weight than words alone. I picked it up, feeling the stiffness beneath my fingers, and turned it over. Slowly. The handwriting was neat, impersonal. A signature I didn't recognize. A return address that smelled faintly of ink in cold offices. I cut it open carefully, letting the paper fold back without tearing. Inside was a letter, crisp and cold, every sentence precise, every word calculated. My daughter had filed legal charges. The words hit softly at first, then sharp, like glass brushing against my ribs. Kidnapping. My children. My grandchildren. The sentences seemed to float in the air, disjointed, almost surreal. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the ache settle in my sternum. The house was quiet. The ticking of the clock became louder, each second a hammer striking in my ears. The children's laughter from the day felt like a distant memory, gone with the sunlight that had disappeared hours ago. I walked slowly through the kitchen, tracing the edge of the counter, grounding myself in the familiar texture of the worn wood. Every small movement reminded me that this house, these rooms, these floors was ours. Memories came unbidden. I thought of the first night she left, her small voice trembling in the doorway, promising to return soon. I remembered the holidays I had stretched every dollar to make special, the bedtime stories I had whispered until the children fell asleep, the breakfasts I had made over years of quiet mornings. All the small sacrifices, the unrecorded hours, the quiet vigilance of love, and now it was called into question. The children peeked around the corner, curious, sensing the tension in my shoulders, the way my fingers lingered on the paper. I folded the letter gently and placed it on the table, careful not to crease it further. Their eyes met mine, searching, innocent, unknowing. I tried to smile, tried to brush it off. "It's nothing," I said softly, but the weight of 13 years pressed down harder than words could carry. I sat down in the chair by the window, holding my head in my hands. The room smelled of faint coffee, the lingering warmth of the day, and a whisper of fear I could not shake. How could someone accuse me of taking what I had cared for every single day? Could a letter, cold and sharp, erase the countless nights I had held them when they cried, when they were scared, when they needed me most. The shadows of the house lengthened as the sun sank lower, brushing across the furniture in thin stripes of gold. I thought of the photos lining the walls, the drawings pinned to the refrigerator, the little marks in the calendar, evidence of love, of life, of care that had never been questioned until now. Could all that be invisible to someone who had been gone for 13 years? I put my hand on the table, tracing the letters, feeling the weight of intention and accusation pressed into paper. The children's laughter drifted faintly from the hallway, and I drew a long, slow breath. The house was ours for now, filled with the quiet proof of years, yet outside, the world had already begun its judgment. I whispered into the fading light, almost to myself, "They cannot take this. They cannot erase what we have lived." The envelope remained, cold and still, as if waiting for the next move. And I knew, deep in my bones, that the fight wasn't over yet, and that time alone might not be enough to protect the truth. The street outside was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt older than the houses themselves. I stood by the window, watching shadows stretch across the pavement. The neighbor's house across the way had lights on, a soft glow spilling onto the frost-kissed lawn. I remembered her, Mrs. Callahan, always waving from her porch, always noticing. When the children grew taller, when their laughter changed with the seasons, she had watched us quietly, without ever needing to ask. I traced the edge of the windowsill, fingers brushing the chipped paint, feeling the grooves carved over decades. Each scratch, each mark, seemed like a witness to the years I had spent keeping them safe. The mailbox still leaned slightly to one side, the garden gate squeaking softly whenever it was opened. Small details unnoticed by most, but I remembered them. Every neighbor, every passing glance, every kind word had silently recorded our life here. I thought of the afternoons I had shared tea with Mrs. Callahan, the way she asked about school projects, birthdays, illnesses, and never once judged the life I had been forced to build alone. Their quiet witness, I realized, had been a lifeline. In these small, unspoken affirmations, I had proof that the world outside our home had seen us, even if the one who left could not or would not. The children played in the living room, unaware of the storm pressing quietly around me. Their laughter echoed against the walls, but there was tension in the air I could not shake. I moved to the front door, resting a hand on the knob. I could hear the neighbor's voice through the thin wood, carrying greetings, small observations, reassurance. Years of observation, of quiet attention, of bearing witness. She had seen our life, and she had never doubted the love I had poured into it. I remembered the day my daughter left. Mrs. Callahan had watched from her porch, her eyes soft, understanding. She had nodded once, simply, a gesture heavy with recognition. She had known, perhaps, that love cannot be measured by presence alone, but by the constancy of care. The memory pressed into me now, a quiet comfort. Even if accusations came, even if doubt stretched like a shadow across our home, someone had seen, someone remembered. I held my hand over my heart, feeling the weight of years settle there. The children's laughter slowed, fading into quiet moments. I traced the edge of the doorframe, grounding myself in the familiar textures of our life. Outside, the world remained oblivious. Inside, the house held memory like a secret. I whispered, softly, almost to the empty street, almost to the past itself. They watched us. They know. And for a moment, it was enough. The neighbor's soft gaze, years of quiet witness, became a lifeline in the storm. But even in that reassurance, I knew the real challenge was still ahead. The letter, the accusations, the distance. They had not yet been resolved. The house settled around me. The shadows leaned close. The street remained silent, waiting. And I realized that sometimes the proof of a life well lived was not only in the walls, but in the eyes of those who had quietly observed it. The dining table was covered in photographs, each one a frozen heartbeat. I spread them carefully, letting the edges touch but not overlap, as if giving them space to breathe. Faces I had watched grow, smiles I had coaxed, tiny hands gripping mine, all laid out like evidence, though I didn't think of it that way. To me, it was memory, love, proof of the life we had lived quietly day by day. Sunlight fell in thin streams through the blinds, glinting off the glossy paper. Dust floated in the rays, dancing like tiny spirits above the images. I picked up one photo, the youngest, laughing mid-step in the front yard, hair messy, cheeks pink from the cold. I remembered the day it was taken. The sky had been gray, the wind sharp, but the children's laughter had been louder than everything else. The older two hovered nearby, curiosity bright in their eyes. They traced the faces with small fingers, pointing at familiar smiles. "That's me," said the middle child. "And this is me," said the oldest, voice tentative. I nodded softly, feeling warmth swell in my chest, mingled with something heavier, the absence of the one who had left. I shuffled through more photographs. Birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, holidays marked by hastily wrapped gifts, and candles blown out with quiet wishes. The children had been safe. They had been loved. Every picture whispered the truth of the years I had spent holding them, guiding them, protecting them. And yet, on the other end of the phone, her voice had accused me of taking what was never mine. I set one photo down and pressed my palms to my eyes. Could she see this? Could she look at these images and recognize the years stitched into every smile, every small victory, every quiet moment? Could a single accusation erase the nights I had stayed awake, the mornings I had rushed to prepare breakfast, the holidays I had labored over, exhausted but determined to make them special? The children leaned against me, their warmth grounding me in the present. I felt their small breaths on my arms, their soft weight against my side. I wanted them to understand, even if just a little, the years of care hidden in these papers. I wanted them to know that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, in photographs, in folded letters, in quiet moments like this. I looked at the stack, thinking of her voice again, distant, accusing, like a shadow trying to rewrite the past. But the photos remained, silent, undeniable, patient. They spoke of what words could not, of what had been lived, of the life we had built together. I arranged the photographs neatly, letting the light catch the glossy edges one last time. The house seemed to breathe with me, settling into quiet understanding. Even the children, now seated on the floor, seemed to sense the weight of the moment without knowing why. I whispered softly, almost to the photographs themselves, "They know. They see us. They remember." And as the sunlight shifted, fading toward the edges of the room, I felt the fragile comfort of proof. The world might not yet believe, but here, in this room, in the glow of memory captured on paper, the truth lived. And it would have to be enough for now. The doorbell rang softly, almost too politely, like it was afraid of the house. I paused. In the kitchen, hand frozen over the counter. The children were nearby, small shadows flitting across the floor, sensing tension but not knowing why. My heart thumped quietly, each beat echoing in the empty spaces of the living room. I opened the door slowly. She stood there, older, strained, a stranger wearing the familiar shape of my daughter. Her eyes didn't smile, her lips pressed together, holding words back like fragile glass. I could smell the faint perfume she always wore, the one that clung to memory and time. She didn't step inside. She didn't look at me. She only waited. The children peeked from behind the sofa, curious, hesitant. Their mother's shadow loomed in the doorway, a reminder of absence. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the years that had stretched between us. But the air was thick, heavy with accusation, with unspoken questions, with the weight of 13 years. I gestured toward the living room. "Come in," I said softly. My voice trembled in ways I didn't notice at first. She stepped forward, carefully, eyes on the floor, hands folded in front of her. I felt every second stretch long, fragile. I opened a photo album and set it on the coffee table. I let my fingers linger on the worn edges of photographs, letting them speak before I did. The children leaned in, tiny hands tracing familiar faces. I watched her face, looking for recognition, for a flicker of memory, anything to show that the years she had been gone hadn't erased us. Her eyes flicked to the pages. The first photo caught her attention. The three of them on the front porch, smiles bright, hair messy from play. She swallowed, but the expression didn't soften. I realized she was trying to reconcile the children she remembered with the lives they had lived without her. I spoke slowly, gently. I raised them. Every day. Every night. 13 years. I kept them safe. I loved them. My voice cracked slightly, but I held it steady, letting the words rest in the room, among the photographs, among the children. She looked away, eyes narrowing, lips trembling. The silence stretched long, thick. The children shifted, sensing the weight of unspoken truths. I let them stay, small and quiet, while the conversation unfolded without words. For a moment, I thought she might turn and leave, that the accusation would stand stronger than the memories I held. But then her hand brushed over the album, fingertips grazing a photo of the youngest blowing out candles. She didn't speak, but her eyes softened, just a little. Recognition, maybe, or understanding fragile and fleeting. I let the silence settle around us. The room held our memories like a living thing, heavy with years of care, of nights spent awake, of laughter and tears. I realized that confrontation was not about raising voices, but about letting truth exist in the quiet, undeniable spaces between us. I whispered softly, almost to myself, almost to her. This is our life. You see it now. You have to see it. The children watched, small and trusting, and I felt the fragile pulse of hope. It might not be complete. It might not be enough. But for now, it was a start, the first quiet step toward a bridge we had nearly lost. The room was heavy with quiet. She sat on the edge of the sofa, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed somewhere between the floor and the photographs on the table. The children were close by, small and uncertain, sensing the tension without understanding it. I sat opposite her, hands resting on my knees, fingers tracing the worn fabric of the armchair. I spoke softly, letting my voice carry the weight of 13 years without accusation, without defense. I loved them. I raised them. Every day. Every night. You weren't here. I was. My words were careful, measured, but trembled under their own truth. The house seemed to lean in, holding its breath with me. Tears came slowly at first, rolling down my cheeks unbidden. She didn't move. She didn't look at me. I wondered if she could even see them, or if her mind was fixed on the anger she had carried for years. I tried to meet her eyes, to let her see the nights I had stayed awake, the mornings I had coaxed them from their beds, the holidays I had stretched myself to make feel normal. The children edged closer, seeking comfort, without speaking. The middle one leaned against my arm, small fingers curling into mine. The youngest rested his head on my shoulder. Their presence grounded me, reminded me why I had endured the silence, the absence, the accusations. They were proof, living proof. I picked up a photograph, the oldest at a school recital, eyes bright, hands trembling as he held his music sheet. I was there, I said, voice almost breaking. Every recital, every first step, every scraped knee. I never left them alone, not once. The words were simple, almost whispered, but heavy with years of care and unspoken devotion. Her hands twitched, brushing against the edge of the photo. She didn't speak. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, I thought she might finally see, might understand. But understanding is fragile, and the weight of absence does not dissolve quickly. The room smelled faintly of old pine and the warmth of late afternoon sunlight. Shadows stretched long across the floor. I let the tears fall in silence, letting them speak the truths that words could not. She finally looked at me, and for a moment, her lips quivered. Recognition, remorse, confusion all tangled together. I whispered, barely audible, "It's not too late to see them, to see what we've lived." My heart ached with hope and fear intertwined. The children stirred slightly, leaning closer, small bodies bridging the years of distance between mother and grandmother. The silence returned, but it was different. Now not heavy, not accusing, but contemplative, fragile, opening. The photos on the table, the letters stacked neatly, the laughter from earlier, all reminders that truth lived here, even if it had been ignored. I looked at her and then at the children. This is what matters, I said softly. They are safe. They are loved. That hasn't changed. She didn't answer immediately. She only sat, letting the weight of my words settle. The room seemed to exhale with us, the shadows softening, the light warmer, gentler. And for the first time that day, I allowed myself a small hope that maybe, just maybe, tears could bridge what time and distance had tried to undo. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft and hesitant, touching the wooden floor like a quiet blessing. The house, which had held so much tension and memory over the last 13 years, felt different now, lighter, fragile, like it was holding its breath with us. I watched the children stir, small bodies stretching, yawning, rubbing sleepy eyes. Their laughter was slow at first, cautious, then growing, spilling across the room like sunlight itself. I sat in the armchair, letting them move around freely, watching the ordinary magic of mornings unfold. A dropped toy, a tiny giggle, a hand reaching for mine. She sat quietly at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. I could see the lines of tension in her face softening. The anger, the accusations, the disbelief, it was still there. But for the first time, it shared space with something else. Recognition, perhaps remorse, or the quiet understanding that life had moved forward even when she had been gone. I cleared my throat softly. They are growing up, you know. And you missed a lot, but they remember you. You don't have to erase that. My voice was gentle, almost a whisper, carrying both warning and invitation. The children looked at us, sensing that something important was being said without needing to hear it all. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. The sunlight caught a tear tracing down her cheek. For a moment, I thought the years of silence might dissolve entirely in that single gesture. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The truth of what we had lived, the quiet constancy of love, was written on the walls, in the photographs, in the very air we breathed outside. The morning birds began their tentative songs. The world was waking up, unaware of the storm we had weathered in our little corner of it. I took a deep breath, feeling it fill the house, the rooms, the hearts of everyone here. For the first time in years, the weight felt less heavy. Not gone, not forgotten, but lighter. I looked at her, then at the children, then back at the soft morning light. This house, I said softly, has held us together when no one else did, and it will continue to do so. But we have to choose to see each other too. The children ran toward the kitchen, voices bright and careless, and she followed, hesitating just a step behind. I stayed by the window, letting the sunlight spill over me. For the first time in a long while, I felt hope stretching quietly between us, not loud, not assured, but there, fragile and patient, like the morning itself. I whispered to the empty house, to the shadows, to the ghosts of all the days we had lived. We survived. We will survive. And maybe one day she will remember everything that really mattered. The light moved across the floor, brushing over the photographs, the letters, the quiet traces of love. And in that gentle illumination, I realized something I had forgotten in all the years of waiting. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind refuses to see, and as the children's laughter echoed softly through the halls, I smiled to myself. The past was still there, stubborn and unyielding, but the morning this morning was ours.